Hi everyone, my name is Sam Montijo, and I would like to speak with all of you about why I believe Puerto Rico should become a state. First thing is, did you know if you were born and then you died in the island of Puerto Rico, never would have visited the mainland of the U.S., you would have always been an American citizen. A lot of people don't realize that Puerto Rico is a commonwealth and territory of the United States, and as such, its citizens are also American. And according to the 2014 Huffington Post article, which is called 20 Things You Didn't Know About Puerto Rico, first thing is, if you go visit the island, leave your passport at home. You don't need it. It's, again, an American territory, so you don't need to get a passport to visit the island, which I highly recommend, by the way. Secondly, the weather is amazing. It is 70 to 80 degrees year-round. That means that it's a tropical island, and everything you would expect of like the Bahamas. Same thing, Puerto Rico has a wonderful climate. This one's pretty cool. As far as a fun fact, 5 Miss Universes have come from the island of Puerto Rico. For such a small island with 4 million inhabitants, it's pretty awesome that 5 Miss Universes have been selected. And then lastly, the world's largest telescope can be found in Puerto Rico, which I personally visited. It's in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. And it is awesome. Again, the largest telescope that's pointed out to space, sending messages for possible life. So the 3 things that I would like to discuss with you as to why I think Puerto Rico should become a state is economically, it would improve the island and also benefit the United States. Secondly, it would give the island citizens the right to vote for president and also give them congressional representation. And then lastly, it would provide much needed social and legal equality for, again, the 4 million inhabitants of the island of Puerto Rico. Why can I speak about this? Well, I am of Puerto Rican descent. I am 3rd generation removed. My grandparents were both sets born in Puerto Rico, and I grew up in the culture, so, excuse me, I understand the Puerto Rican people and kind of their concerns, and I've heard dialogues and debates about statehood. And so the first thing I want to talk about is the economy. What would that do? What would statehood mean for the island of Puerto Rico? According to an April 2014 article on congressblog.com, which was made by resident commissioner Pedro Pierluisi, this was a quote directly from him. Over the past year, Puerto Rico's economic problems, which are long-standing and structural, have devolved into a crisis. The 3 major credit rating agencies have downgraded the territory's bonds to non-investment grade. And he goes on to say, Puerto Rico's unemployment rate is 15% compared to a U.S. national average of 6.7%. As you can see, Puerto Rico has problems when it comes to economic concerns and conditions. The article also goes on to say that the GAO, which is the Government Accountability Office, made a report in 2015 that stated that statehood would mean an improved economy because of infused business development and also federal aid from the U.S. government. And then the other argument here by this report that came out from the GAO was that federal overlays to Puerto Rico, which would mean federal aid, would be counterbalanced and also be in the surplus by federal revenues. So in other words, revenue coming from the state because of taxes, which would actually be to the tune of almost $7 billion. So economically, it would not just help the island of Puerto Rico, it would also help mainland U.S. In addition to economical advantages of statehood, also Puerto Ricans would gain the ability to vote for the president in general elections and also have representation in Congress. February 2015, there was an article called Why Puerto Rico Matters in the Race for President. And in Article 2, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution, it states that only states can participate in the electoral process. What does this mean for Puerto Rico? That means that they can vote in primaries, in the presidential primaries, but they can't vote in the general election. So statehood would give them that right. Also, statehood would give them congressional representation. And so there was an article from 2010 that said, what would Puerto Rico statehood mean? It means that 4 million residents in the island, they would gain 6 congressional seats and they would get 2 senators. So they would have that representation that's sorely needed in Congress. And lastly, statehood would provide social and legal equality that is desperately needed for Puerto Rican citizens. There was a November 2014 article by Rebecca Buckwalter Poza, and it's called What is the Matter with Puerto Rico?, where she says, unquote, Puerto Ricans are subject to some of the most egregious and pervasive ongoing civil rights violations of this country. She says that they have one-sided citizenship. They pay federal taxes, they're eligible for the draft, they fought in world wars, but they're denied the protection of the Bill of Rights, and they don't have the right to vote for the president. So, again, what does all of this mean? In conclusion, as to why, again, I believe that Puerto Rico should become a state is it would give economic improvements to the island and also help the U.S. economy. It would provide the Puerto Ricans the ability to vote and have congressional representation. And lastly, give equality that is much needed to Americans. You don't hear Hawaiians being called Hawaiians and Alaskans first. They're called Americans first. So the question is, why haven't we created a referendum for Puerto Rican statehood? And my opinion is it's long past due.